our first weekend here. As we do get into game, we're going to see what 9.1 strats both of these teams have, as we actually do have that Warlock being broken out by winning lane kick, and here they go right into that first pull.
Here we go. It looks like it's going to be a little bit different, too, from both teams. Wow, Perplex pulling just... Is that triple trash packs on top of Incinerator as well? Okay, that's kind of scary. If that Inferno cast goes off, we're going to see a very quick wipe from any team that goes for that pull. Winning lane kick, however, completely opting to go for a different strategy. They've skipped Incinerator entirely and are going straight into Globgrog.
Yeah, interesting. Unfortunately, their mage is already down here for winning lane kick. Oh no, and you saw the expression as well with the camera right there, the face palm coming out. Oh no, it's very unfortunate. They should have a battle rest the Warlock can use to get him back up. But it looks like he just procced Cauterize, and he also had the Seed proc as well. Very unfortunate, as Perplexed is almost done with their pull. I actually wonder if the Fungalmancer cast does buff the Tormentor as well. I would assume it does, right? So that's something they have to watch out for.
Yeah, no issues as well.
And now they're getting that anima power. Yeah, that was a really nice pull. And Wolf actually playing Frost. So he's playing Frost Mage here in Plaguefall instead of the Fire Mage on winning lane kick side.
Yeah, so the difference between the Frost and the Fire Mage is really going to be used, I believe, in mostly Tyrannical keys where you can use a Shadow Priest. If you're ever not running the Shadow Priest, it's actually more valuable to play the Frost Mage because they just kind of do very consistent AoE damage over time, whereas Fire is like a very big burst every minute or so. So if you're ever doing just back-to-back-to-back constant big pulls, Frost gains a ton of value, and it's also a lot more consistent on priority damage, which is insanely strong for keys like this.
Yeah, and if you look at the damage meter, I was wondering, are they playing a Monk Healer and a Red Paladin, or what is going on here? But no, it's actually just Ryzen popping his cooldowns here, making the Ash and Hallow just doing an insane amount of damage on this on this boss pull here. Probably had Swag completely destroyed the pack before, though, as they're now moving on. They also, of course, committed their Bloodlust as well for that initial pull. And now they're going to be moving on to the most interesting area of Plaguefall now, because Plaguefall actually has been changed quite a lot in 9.1. Now with the Plague Borers not actually going to be helping you out that much anymore. In the Gauntlet, you will only get a limited amount of Plague Borers spawning, and the other Plague Borers throughout Plaguefall are not actually going to help you out anymore. They're not actually exploding anymore.
Yep, so you have to do a lot more damage on your own that you would have otherwise had to done with Plague Borers in the past. Something that I thought we would see a lot more of this season was using those Fungalmancers, right? The strategy where you just consistently are spell stealing that buff, but it looks like Perplexed aren't really going for that strategy. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Key Tula, maybe you don't want to do that on a 19, which is of course the lowest key level that we have in the MDI this time around. Maybe if we see that on like a 22 and weeks after this, they'll opt to go for that strategy. But interesting to see what different things teams are going to do. Again, another big pull here. They have to do all this damage on their own. And again, here's the strength of that Frost Mage. With the high item level of Icy Propulsion, which reduces your Icy Veins cooldown, plus just consistent AoE damage, you just always have damage for pretty much every single pull. Yes, you're not going to burst as high as a Fire Mage, but you're going to do very good damage consistently, even just beating out the Windwalker Monk. Although the Monk might not be getting procs of his, Dance of Chi-Ji, but still, great damage from both of those classes there.
So disaster for winning lane kick, as they have a full team wipe going in after that first boss went down. They did get a rest on their mage, but unfortunately just didn't work out on that pull that they tried to do there. They're gonna have to reset. The problem is that you can see some of them don't have Shadow Melt available, and I don't think their pot is definitely not available either, as they were using that invisibility potion at the start to get past that first trash. And now, not sure what they're going to do to get back here, as we now looking at Perplexed as they are in that, I think this is the third trash pull of their dungeon. They're having some huge pulls into huge pulls, and you can just see how much damage Wolf Disco is doing on that Frost Mage. Crazy.
Yep. Very strong. I mean, he's always going to have damage for every pull unless he somehow dies, and that's the worst case scenario for Frost because Icy Veins is a 3-minute cooldown, but it's just such a low cooldown because of the CDR like I talked about earlier. So if he ever dies with a lot of time left on Icy Veins, that's going to be a huge time loss for them over the course of their dungeon. So got to keep an eye on that whenever people are playing that Frost spec. But yeah, this is one of the big changes going into this dungeon. We talked about it already. The Plague Borer is not helping you out for a lot of the dungeons, so you have to bring consistent AoE damage classes to get through those big pulls. You can't just kind of snooze through them anymore. And again, that's going to change how they do this section of the dungeon, the second boss of Dr. Ickes. One of the strategies we saw at the end of last season was teams would use those plague borers to pretty much instantly kill the boss. 2 sets of bombs on the boss would kill it. You didn't have to worry about killing any of the bombs. They're probably going to have to either use all of their cooldowns defensively to just not worry about killing a bomb, or they'll just kill the bomb on their own. I'm curious to see what their strategy is going to end up being here.
Yeah, it looked like they were not using many plague borers for the trash before the mini boss, and now there we go. Dr. Ickes is being pulled on top of all of the rest of the trash that is left in this area here. Keep in mind that we do have explosive, but I'm pretty sure Ryzen is just dealing with most of those. Not sure how good Frost Mage actually is to kill explosives, but I guess you would always just prefer having the healer or the tank deal with those whenever they can.
Yeah, it feels pretty bad as a Frost Mage to hit them, because you almost always have an open global to do, Blizzards, Frozen Orbs, or just Empowered Ice Lances on the boss. All of those are extremely valuable to hit. So, yeah, it's probably going to be, in most cases, the healer or the rogue, I would assume, hitting them, or maybe even the tank. And yeah, look, it looks like they're completely ignoring this first Plague Bomb. They have a lot of personal cooldowns. Tank should live on his own. They have Cloak, Block, Diffuse, and Bubble, to live through everything. So they're just going to commit probably all of their immunities to living through this bomb explosion here. Or they'll just kill the boss before it goes off. No, okay, there's the immunities.
There we go. All of the immunities coming out, making sure no one is going to die to that one. Well done, as they're now moving on. And yeah, that's a pretty good kill time for them as well. I do think what you said is correct with the key level basically being too low for them to decide to take the Fungalmancer with them, or also, it also looked like the Plague Borers weren't used as much either, which probably also just goes back to the key level being too low. So maybe with other groups, like Group B or Group C, maybe the key level is going to be higher, and maybe those teams decide to do a different strategy here. But it looks like Perplex definitely choosing to just press W basically and pull as much as they can with just the damage that the classes do without using any sort of buffs.
So it's important to mention at this point in the dungeon that they have now skipped the first defensive Tormentor, the second DPS Tormentor, and of course you just saw them skip Sagat on the Breaker. They're their 4th Tormentor. So they're only going into this boss having killed 1 Tormentor. That means they're going to be slowed by 50%. The boss will be doing 50% increased physical damage, and they'll only be taking 50% healing as well. All of those debuffs stacked up on top of this boss. But at the same time, this is the best case scenario for stacking debuffs like that. We're in 19, the lowest key level that we have in the MDI this season, and it's on Fortified, so the boss isn't as dangerous as it could be if it were Tyrannical. So it shouldn't be too big of a deal. But again, I mean, that's just a huge time save. Each of those Tormentors probably takes 30 seconds to kill on its own, or just making a big AoE pull even more dangerous by pulling it into that. So just a big time save by skipping all those Tormentors.
For sure, I do still think it's going to be pretty dangerous to play the last boss because of that AoE damage that she does. That usually, especially if you don't have a lot of disease dispels. But they have a lot of defensives. They have immunities to get rid of those diseases. So I guess it should be doable for Ryzen to out-heal that incoming damage, even with the 50% healing debuff. But I think it's still going to be interesting. We'll see how they deal with that later. But you can also see some pulls that we haven't seen before in Season 1 because of that Pride affix not being there anymore, right? We've never really seen Domina Venomblade being pulled into trash just because you had a Pride mob spawn there, and you can't really play a Pride mob with Domina Venomblade. So now we saw the trash pull, and then the boss just being pulled on top of it, which is possible because you don't have that restriction anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big reasons we're seeing new class picks like Frost Mage and Subtlety Room, because both of those classes are insanely good at funneling single target damage from doing AoE. And as you can see, they're both topping the damage right now while doing probably most of the boss damage here. I'd guess that most of Swag's damage is doing AoE to the assassins and the trash that they pulled with the boss. So just new comp meta because of the affix pool, because of the changes from Season 1 to Season 2. I think it's going to be a pretty big trend to see a lot of focus damage in most of these dungeons, especially on Fortified. But I think it changes a lot when you get into Tyrannical keys, because you really need to focus on way more single target damage rather than doing AoE damage.
Yeah, I think so as well. Now we see Swag just pulling some of those blobs from the right side over, and they're dealing with this last boss room. You can see they're not even 10 minutes into the dungeon and they're already in this last boss room. So incredibly quick clear here by Perplex so far without any deaths whatsoever. Incredibly good showing by Perplex already from the get-go here. No nerfs, no nothing. They're literally just born to do this kind of speedrunning here for the MDI. Just really well done by them so far. And another thing to mention as well is that we have different covenants for some of the classes as well, right? We see the Necrolord here on the Windwalker, which is really convenient because in Season 1, no one really liked to play Necrolord from the classes that were represented in the MDI. So usually you have the tank go Necrolord, which maybe wasn't preferred, but they had to do it anyway, just to get like a buff sometimes. But now Divine Field can play Kyrian because Swag is just taking up that role of the Necrolord.
And here we go, on to Margrave Stradama. You can see all of those debuffs filling up the party frames at the top there with those 3 debuffs I mentioned earlier. 50% slow speed, 50% healing reduction, and on top of that, 50% increased physical damage taken, even on 19 Fortified. I think if you take one of those Tentacle Slams, it probably is a one-shot with that increased physical damage taken. So really have to pay attention to all of that going on right now. Even if it's 19 Fortified, it's nothing to laugh at. And, I mean, what more could you expect from Perplexed? Coming in as the 1 seed, crushing it already.
Yeah, and their Bloodlust just came up, even though they used it on that first pull in a dungeon. Just crazy how fast they are. I would assume they're going to pop it now, or in the last... There we go. Bloodlust being used by a Wolf Discon, a Trust Mage, and they're going to blast through this phase so quickly. I guess at that point, the 50% healing reduction doesn't really matter anymore if you're just going to blast the buff so quickly into the intermission phase. There's barely any rains even coming out. You can see Infectious Rain just now starting, and so only really have to heal one of them, which they can use all of their defenses for, as you can see. Just Cloak, everything just being popped immediately to help out Ryzen.
Wolf not even using the Ice Block. For shame, Wolf, for shame. Maybe Alter timed
I think
it,
it's
though.
not ready, right?
You're right,
Just
it
like
wasn't up.
a couple of seconds.
He probably could have cold snapped and gotten it, but...
Probably,
I mean,
yeah.
You gotta give your healers something to do, right?
True. Alright, so there we go. They are in the last phase. Of course, they already have 100% trash as well. So as soon as Stradama goes down here, they're gonna be taking that first game pretty convincingly against winning lane kick. Of course, they had a lot of issues on their side, which hopefully can be resolved for that second dungeon raid we're gonna see soon. But congrats, Perplexed. What a clean run.
Yep, it's time for Cryhard with a Vengeance as game number 2 gets rolling here versus Ambition as Plaguefall gets started.
Where are they going?
All right, so yeah, they're actually taking a little bit of a different route here, interestingly enough. Not exactly sure why, but it looks like they're picking up still a pretty big... oh, they skipped the big guy, basically, yeah, so that was the reason behind it. They didn't want to deal with this, the big... construct walking around. Cryhard doing an even bigger skip as they immediately just go into Globgrog and pulling those slimes as well. So just a different approach here from Ambition and Cryhard.
Well, not only did they skip the big giant, they also skipped that initial 3-pack as well that kind of sits at the opening. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use that route before. I was really confused when I saw where they were on the screen when we loaded in there. But yeah, that pull is a tiny bit smaller than what we're used to seeing because of that. Maybe they've got some extra count throughout the dungeon, but regardless, still a big pull and still able to deal with it relatively cleanly. Everything goes down. They didn't even commit Bloodlust to it there. They're all trying to siphon their anima, even though they're standing in the fire on the ground. They had to cast Siphon Anima like 5 times to get their buff. It's okay, it's okay. Meanwhile, Cryhard has dealt with all those slimes in the room, and they're on to Globgrog, which is what Ambition is just now pulling and have committed their Bloodlust to.
Yeah, so quickly talking about the comp, it's actually a mirror comp here that they're going for. The only difference is that we see a Fire Mage on Cryhard's side, while Asuna on Ambition is playing Frost. So a little bit of a difference in choice of spec here. Asuna also playing Venthy or Frost Mage. We've seen a lot of Night Phase being played, but now in this dungeon he prefers to play Venthyr, while of course the Fire Mage is sticking to that Nightway Covenant. And now they're also engaging Globgrog, and look how fast they're dealing with Globgrog's HP here. because they pulled the boss quite a lot later, and now they're not only like 20% behind. They also committed the last for the boss. Both of them did, actually. And they have this extra buff from the Tormentor, so that's something you have to look at as well. I really wonder if Cryhard is going to completely skip that first Tormentor and deal with the like the fire duct on the last boss, because otherwise I don't necessarily see why they're skipping the Tormentor to do the boss first, because otherwise, like, you're just missing out the buff, right? The buff usually is something you want to go for immediately.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is they want to get their Bloodlust on cooldown literally right away, but I don't think that's that big of a deal.
True.
Because if this dungeon is going to be in that 15-minute range that we're talking about before the key started, you should be totally fine popping your Bloodlust 1 or 2 minutes into the dungeon and getting one pull out of the way that you don't need it for first. So just a little bit of inefficiencies in the routing, and yeah, exactly. They're going back and dealing with that Incinerator right now. Might even pull a little bit of trash on it. Might not, might just single target it down. But yeah, I mean, it's so crazy how much damage Holy Paladins are capable of doing, even after the nerfs in 9-1. I mean, you saw them flexing their 4th DPS muscle on that boss right there. Ellesmere was bursting as high on the boss plus the slimes as their Frost Mage was, doing almost 100k DPS bursts. It's insane.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy just how much damage they can do, and it's so valuable. This is why, especially in some of these like faster dungeons, they really plan out the route according to that Ashen Hollow, because Ashen is definitely the longest DPS cooldown they have as a group, right? All the other DPS classes, their cooldowns are quite a lot shorter than that 4-minute cooldown, so they really are planning out their routes perfectly around the Ashen, making sure they have it in the correct moment, making sure that it also lines up with the Bloodlust as well whenever they are deciding to use it. And now Ambition doing some pretty big trash pulls. They started with the left side first, pulled some of the Plague Rocks on top of the higher HP mobs, and now they're doing some of the Plague Binders and Slimes here. One thing to note about Plaguefall specifically is that they changed this dungeon 9.1, and the Plague Borers that used to be here, they have a different name now and they don't explode anymore. So you cannot use those explosions in your favor anymore to deal with the trash. You still do have the Plague Borers in the mini-boss room that is going to happen right after this room, but it only spawns a certain set of bombs, and then afterwards they will stop spawning. So last weekend, we basically saw teams almost ignore the bombs and not use them at all. They just like ran through the dungeon and just killed everything as they went. But the key was also lower, it was a 19, and now it's a 21. So we'll see if they actually make use of those bombs a little bit more.
Yeah, we specifically saw them shroud through that tentacle gauntlet just so they'd have to deal with any of the tentacles and only kill the mini-boss, so they didn't have to worry about that gauntlet at all, which is such a hugely different strategy from what we were used to last season, where you would just use those bombs for the first, like, 5 minutes of the dungeon and get 60% of your count. So, yeah, it's cool to see how different balancing of dungeons changes the whole strategy here. Now you can see they are doing that. They're using that shroud, skipping past as much of this gauntlet as possible, and just going to be going straight into the mini-boss. So yeah, not too much of a different strategy from last week. I don't think that the key level or the Tyrannical versus Fortified is really going to change what you want to do here. Just killing those individual tentacles is so slow and so inefficient count-wise now that the bombs don't do anything that it's not something you really ever want to deal with.
Yeah, that's something we definitely see a lot in this in the MDI. Just anything that cannot be moved around, like these tentacles, they usually just decide to skip that kind of trash because there rarely is anything you can pull on top of it, and it just makes it incredibly inefficient, even when you have those bombs to help you out. So it looks like they used the last spawn of Plague Borers, though, to deal with this trash pack. So still a pretty efficient pull, so they used their bombs for only the mini-boss and for one trash pull. So still decent efficiency got out of this out of the bombs, as they're now engaging Dr. Ikis, as well as 2 trash packs. So still pretty dangerous to deal with this. I think a lot of the cooldowns are not actually back up just yet, so this might be a little bit of a difficult time here to start, but it looks like 1C is dealing with the trash just fine, as he's doing 80k DPS on all of those trash mobs.
Yep, Onesie's there to blast AoE, and JPC, the man, and Billy on the mage there are just there to do single target damage. And you can see all the trash dies, boss is phased, perfectly executed. Now, similar strategy to what we've seen. I imagine they're going to be completely ignoring this first Plague Bomb and using all of the different choices and types of immunities they have across the board to deal with this first Virulent Explosion. Now the question is 21 Tyrannical a high enough key level to where you can burn the boss past the second explosion? Because the boss starts to have a lot of HP once you get into these 20 Tyrannical levels.
I definitely think it's going to be close. And I think if they make any sort of mistake with the slime, with the damage reduction slime, it's not going to work out. But I do think they should have enough, if they save some of those offensive cooldowns that they still have left, to be able to deal with it. But it's going to be all on, I believe it's going to be Ellesmere probably that will taunt out the slime and deal with it. But yeah, it looks like they are committing. You can see everyone is still targeting Dr. Ickes. We see the Ring of Peace coming out by 1C, making sure the slime immediately got pulled away. And now we saw a blind as well come out of JPC, making sure that... but yeah, it's actually kind of close. As you can see, the boss is kind of not dropping now. Yeah, they are fine. They're fine. Okay, they still had a couple of seconds left here. There was some burst left. As JPC was, I think he was just committing his cooldown there at the very end, as to make sure that they have enough damage. Seems a little. Maybe they can sometimes save it in practice. It's possible that that's something that they can save. And then when they saw that it was kind of close, he just decided to pop this cooldown here to make sure that they're getting damage done. And they skip another Tormentor here, so I think the last boss might be pretty hard with quite a lot of Tormentor debuffs.
I mean, we saw this from teams last week. Again, 19 Fortified, we saw this from teams last week. Not killing Execution of Ruth, having that damage reduction cooldown, damage reduction buff, rather, on the last boss. And that kind of stacks up with the other debuffs, right? Not being able to heal your teammates on on this boss, on Stradama, that's pretty scary on 19 Fortified. On 21 Tyrannical, that sounds like suicide to me. But again, this is what we wanted to see from them. We said this before the first dungeon in this series. We want to see Ambition go as fast as they can, show us what you got, and they're going for just that. I think I would be a little bit disappointed if they pulled Execution of Ruth, and they're just going all the way in. They're pulling Venomblade with the trash. Let's go.
This is a double ambusher pull, triple ambusher actually, triple ambusher pull with Venomblade as well. You can see all those spiders casting that ambush. They need to be interrupted somehow. Let's see if they have something left. It looks like they just AoE'd them down. Oh, and the Frost Nova coming out of Asuna, making sure it's interrupted last second. And there's so much trash still alive. This looks absolutely crazy, just how many mobs there are on top of the boss. Just doing huge amount of AoE damage as well. And then the bursting just keeps coming out on the group. And also, you're doing a really good job keeping everyone alive with the Ashen being popped too. They held the Ashen for this, I'm pretty sure. I think they had used it on that first boss and then held it all the way for this, specifically because they wanted to do that boss pull. The only mob that is left is this one sniper in the corner, and it looks like they might want to engage that as well. I'm not sure, it doesn't look like it just yet.
Are they even in combat with it? It's not CC'd, is it? I don't see a sap or paralysis on it. Well, they're gonna.
There we go. So now they're engaging it. Yeah, I don't think they were in combat with it, but I guess they just decided to pull it later on. The sniper is another mob that just can be dangerous to deal with. Right. But yeah, that was an absolutely crazy pull. That was so well executed.
I mean, every other mob in the group is accountable damage, right? It's either casts or tank damage. The sniper is one extra added variable that'll just randomly shoot players in your group, so it'll be an extra amount of random burst damage on one player that's really difficult to deal with as a healer, especially as a Holy Paladin. So you just remove it from the equation. You do big pull, you CC the sniper, so you don't have to worry about those extra little chunks of damage going out on one single person, so that there's less chance for one person to get one shot. And, you know, that helps for things like bursting stacks as well, right? If you're getting ticked down by bursting, a random shot to the head could just kill you from one of the snipers. So just really safe play when you're going for that insane strat. And it looks like they're on pace for that mark that we were talking about, that high 14, low 15 mark, killing Dominant Venomblade at around 11:30, I think it'll be on the board when they get this down. Gives them 3 minutes to deal with Margrave Stadama and the trash in the room. I think they're on pace for that. I think they can do it.
Yeah, they're definitely incredibly fast. As the boss goes down, Venomblade goes down, they're moving on. Of course, they have enough trash to be able to get the last percentage downstairs, so they don't have to pull anything extra. They made sure the Bloodlust... I mean, they literally couldn't have used Bloodlust on any other boss because they're only 11 minutes in the dungeon, so they really only just got the lust back up for this last boss. Ellesmere getting some mana as the rest of the team doesn't really just need Ellesmere just yet before they gathered up this pull. Bursting can be a little bit of a problem here in this pull, and keep in mind they don't really have any master spell or anything to help them out. They are playing dwarves, all of them except Nerf, of course. So they can get rid of those bursting stacks, and they have made use of that dwarf racial a lot before as well. On those other trash pulls that they were doing, really, really valuable. A lot of those alliance racials specifically for the MDI are so good, and that's why we see dwarves mainly, and sometimes we also see those night elves, making sure they can shut them out off the aggro of certain pulls or certain trash packs. But yeah, Ambition doing a really good job dealing with this last trash room. Not much you can do other than making sure you're focusing Iker here, the mini boss, because once the mini boss dies, the boss triggers, the rest of the mobs, they have a lot less HP and they can just be passively cleaved down.
Oh yeah, and here we go, sub 13 minutes. Margrave's Drama being engaged. They have the Bloodlust available. Probably won't pop it in this first phase since they have all of their actual damage cooldowns available. I'd probably guess it'd be popped in the second phase, or maybe whenever the Wings Ashen is up for Ellesmere. I think that should be in about a minute here, as you can see by the timers at the top of the screen. Is that new, by the way? Are those countdown timers new? I know we've had the cooldowns, but I don't think we've ever had the numbers before. I digress, though. First phase, first infectious rain going out. They do get the full channel, but shouldn't be too big of a deal. Everyone has plenty of personals available right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is still very dangerous, though. As you can see, even in the intermission phase, if you don't attack those ads, you won't have the debuff from the Tormentors. As you can see, Ellesmere, for example, did not attack any of the Devoted, so he's the one, or the only one without those debuffs. But the important thing is that they're getting through these boss phases as quickly as possible. It's very likely that they assign all of those offensive cooldowns exactly for specific phases. We see the Bloodlust being popped now, so the Bloodlust should be carrying this phase. Hopefully they're not going to get more than one rain, because one rain is already difficult to heal with that 50% healing reduction that they have on them, right? So they need to make sure that they get as little ticks as possible. You can see the boss is casting it right now. Cloak being used by JPC, the rest of the cooldowns just being saved. Actually, no, Asuna blocking as well. So we see both Cloak and Block being used to make sure they survive this. And now they're gonna have one more rain to go through, though. I'm pretty sure in the last phase they're gonna get one extra rain. So that's gonna be the last difficult check they have to meet before this boss goes down.
Yeah, and I mean, that's totally fine. Actually, probably preferable that they use their immunities or personals in this phase, because they're going to have the Ashen Hollow for the next phase. They should be able to passively heal through the first Infectious Rain. The only danger would be if they get the second Infectious Rain, but with the Ashen coming out right now, the wings are popped, they have the cooldowns rolling, they should be totally fine. I mean, all the 2 minutes are up. This boss is getting absolutely destroyed. Unfortunately, not going to be sub 15 minutes, but still, this is an insanely fast run. And again, a zero death run. Ambition playing completely perfectly. 0 deaths throughout the entire series in their first ever MDI match. What more could you ask for from this team? These guys definitely showed what they have to bring to the table in this first matchup.
Have some issues with the first pull of the dungeon, and I'm interested to see what Incarnation and Stiefbrooders put up for their first pull. What do you think that they're about to do here, Dratnos?
All right, so I think Incarnation's probably going to shroud through here, whereas I think Stiefbrooders are instead going to get started by actually pulling a lot of this trash. And, oh my goodness, it's happening. Incarnation getting started with their pull. Both teams going on to the Incinerator Arcolith here, and we can see Ashen Hallow, Bloodlust being committed on both sides. Actually not Ashen Hallow, notably. Growl on the side of Incarnation there on Yummy Pala, not using the Ashen Hallow, so they will still have that resource available for a future pull, but it means this pull is so much scarier for them than it is for the Stiefbrooders. Oh, look at the bolstering stacks, though, starting to come out, though, on both sides. This is starting to get extremely hairy towards the end of the pull. A lot of crowd control needing to be used. You can see a lot of danger that the players are under here on both sides. They've done it, though. They've been able to kill off all these mobs. Incarnation actually able to get this pull done a little bit more quickly than the Stiefbrooders, but notice they got a little bit less count out of that as well. So all things being equal, you know, Incarnation gained a little bit of time, and they still have their Ashen Hallow, but they gave up 4% in the exchange. Hard to tell who got the better of that one.
it looks like they're both pulling the boss at very similar times. And Incarnation and the Steve Brooders are both, you see them, it is a 19 on Fortified, so it's fine that they're pulling Globgrog to this area. We saw this a lot last season. Whenever you had that prideful buff, you were able to burn Globgrog before you got multiple casts of that slime wave or just other issues occurring. But since it's a 19 and it is bolstering, you really don't want to clear out the middle of that room from all those slimes, since they are super inefficient on that bolstering affix. And it's so nice to see that both Incarnation and the Steve Brooders have come to like similar conclusions, but that Ashen Hollow absolutely doing work for Incarnation, as you see Yummy Palakir, that Venthyr Holy Paladin, at 11k DPS right now. Dude, I feel like we've had that just every single weekend. It's just like JB's Druid was named JB Nightfey. It was like a Kyrian Druid.
Yeah, you're just trying to trick your team. You log into that and they don't invite you because you got Kyrian in your name and you're a paladin. As Incarnation, actually very close to having those orbs absorbed by the boss. Look at the side of Steve Brooders as well. Great management of these slimy morsels. The Sigil of Misery there, just keeping them all beautifully stacked up. They are making a great showing here on this first boss. Incarnation now getting started with this next trash pull. This one is another one that can be tricky to manage with bolstering, but you have the priority damage of the Subtlety Rogue and the Frost Mage here, adding a lot of value and making it so that Spinebreaker can actually be one of the first mobs to die in the pack, rather than becoming a 50 bolstering stacks monstrosity.
Well,
it's still pretty large, though.
Yeah, he's very large, but he's super low on his HP. You did see him get bolstered at something like 0.5%, and all of that trash gets dealt for Incarnation really well. That was a great job. Just great preparation, knowing how many globals they need to put into all of that trash. Of course, with some variance, depending on GG procs.
Yeah, there we go. Incarnation now getting started with this next pull.
Oh, no. The Steve Brooders, dude. Look at this. They have that Spinebreaker bolstered so high.
And actually, so even though that's only at 10%, that thing now has a lot of raw health, right? In terms of percentage, it's still at 10%, but each time it gets a bolstering stack there, you can see that actually, only costs them about 5 seconds, so really not that bad. Turn of events for the Steve Brooders, who are really, again, they actually have a little bit more count here as well. So even though they're a little bit behind Incarnation in terms of progression through the dungeon, they have earned a little bit more count from the start of the dungeon too. So if that enables them to skip something later, then that could be an opportunity for them to slingshot their way into the lead. Incarnation are not letting up, though. They are getting started with another big pull here. These Slime Claws can be pretty deadly if they're not taken care of very, very efficiently, especially with bolstering as an active affix. They love to run away towards the end of the pull, and if you let them do that, they're going to get a bunch of bolstering stacks, and then they're going to come back in and they're going to kill one of your group members with that that Fervent Strike ability, their claw. But you can see Incarnation, beautiful. So what they've done actually is they've saved their AoE stuns and stuff for the end of this pull rather than using them on pull.
Yeah.
And that's really, really great way to manage those mobs that like to run away when they're on low health.
Yeah, and so, okay, so I thought that one of them ran away, but they did end up getting that one killed off that was running towards the top of the stairs. And now I'm interested to see what Incarnation is going to do here. A lot of teams have been shrouding through this double Plague Borer set. Ooh, but Incarnation has identified that they need more trash count, and these tentacles give 10 count apiece. They've been commonly skipped from a lot of our teams over the weekends, but at the same time, it hasn't been bolstering yet in this dungeon. So routing is going to be up in the air, because whenever it is bolstering, they're like the Devout ads towards the end of the instance, and those slimes that are in the Globgrog room are a lot less valuable mobs to kill than it would normally be. And so Incarnation has decided to get some of their count from those two tentacles, just using those bombers to be able to blow those up. Those Plague Borers do... There is a limited number of Plague Borers that you can get this season from Blightweaver, and I suspect that Incarnation is now going to pull these two remaining Plague Borers after Blightweaver dies into a trash pack, and you see Dorky on that Vengeance Demon Hunter running straight to that trash pack on the right and dealing with that. While on the side of the Steve Brooders, they're doing the exact same pull that we saw from Incarnation and dealing with that all of that trash really well, getting that Slime Claw also kidneyed, and they're almost at identical points of trash. Of course, Incarnation is a little bit further ahead, like progressed in terms of where they are in the dungeon, but the Steve Brooders don't have to deal with any of these tentacles, which is really just nice, a difference actually. I think that is a pretty good thing just as a whole.
The tentacles are a pretty annoying type of mob to fight here. So the Sheep Brooders are now going to get this explosion onto their mini-boss. Meanwhile, Incarnation are pulling all the rest of the trash in this boss room. They're not going to go and try and sneak ahead and grab the anima power. We sometimes see teams flirting with the idea of grabbing the next anima power before the boss, or say during a trash pull. But Incarnation not interested in doing something like that. Junkrat actually going to be cheap death used there, as a couple of the slime explosions landed right on top of him. Unfortunate turn of events there for Incarnation as so they're dragging Dr. Ickis back towards where the red slime died, and that means that players can actually stand in that red slime, take a little bit of damage over time, but gaining some haste as a trade-off. And as all DPS players know, just heal me. You know, I'll take this haste buff. Go ahead and heal
Just
me.
heal me, lol.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Incarnation is running towards Dr. Ickis. A lot of teams have been letting this bomb go off, and I suspect on a 19 Fortified, it shouldn't be anything different. I think that they have ample amounts of defensives that they can deploy here to be able to live, whether it be immunities or just touch of karma, lol.
Cryptics.
Ooh, Cryptics in a seed. This is really bad because now he should come out of the seed and be able to ice block before this bomb goes off. But that was a very unfortunate situation for him.
Yeah, that was the Dr. Ickis' jumps that do the little four-way explosion. As you can see, everybody now going to fire off their immunes on the side of Incarnation. Big burst of damage coming out, but they are all going to be fine, and now they need to kill Dr. Ickis before this next Plague Bomb explodes. At this Keystone level, with Fortified active instead of Tyrannical, they are going to easily be able to make that DPS check. And let's see what they're up to next. On the side, meanwhile, of the Stief Brooders, Stief Brooders are, it looks like, going more towards that Tormented Mob before the boss strategy, which I love this strategy. I think this is a really good strategy for people to use on the live servers as well. Get a little bit more anima power before that boss fight. If you're going to kill it anyways, I think it's a really great idea. The reason Incarnation didn't do that is because they have no intention of fighting Executioner Varud. They want that extra challenge with the last boss in exchange for a little bit more time.
And I think that this is like not a bad play for the Stief Brooders. They are at similar count to Incarnation, but they are notably a full boss behind. But if like their way to get back into this game is an Incarnation mistake, and that certainly could happen on Margrave Stradama whenever you have the Oros Coldheart slow, whenever you have that Execution of Ruth 50% heal reduction, and it's Quaking on top of all of that.
Oh no!
Oh, but the Stief Brooders tank has gone down. This is really bad. It looks like just the Spinebreaker is left alive. They do have Baruth killed off, so they should be able to kite this out.
Yeah, I think they're going to be able to recover from this, but this was a rough turn of events there for the Stief Brooders. That's going to cost them their one battle res. They will get another res up in the next couple of minutes here, so that will return as a resource for them. But if something were to go wrong on this boss fight, especially in the first minute of this boss fight, they don't have that res available. That could potentially be very costly. They have, though, done a great job of recovering. They now have that extra anima power at their disposal as well as they get started here with Dr. Ickis. Meanwhile, Incarnation doing all of this trash. They aren't doing anything super crazy like pulling trash onto the boss, mostly because that is off limits on this Bolstering affix. It's something that you would need to do like at the end of the boss fight rather than the start of this boss fight, and you can't really do that on this boss fight because the ads that it spawns will just aggro all that trash if you don't pull it ahead of time.
All right, and now Dominant Venom Blade has been engaged for Incarnation. They do have that sniper blinded off to the side. I'm interested to see how they're going to deal with it. If they're just going to pull Dominant Venom Blade on top of it after they break out all these Brute Assassins, that would be my expectation. And you do see Dorky here leaping around, grabbing all these Assassins out. And one of those Assassins' puddles is like right where that sniper is. Oh, and so they break it. They break the Assassin out, and then they re-para on that sniper. I wonder where they're going to use... I wonder when they're going to kill it, because they're notably... They all are Alliance, but they don't have an ability to be able to drop that sniper. Maybe if that sniper's not tagged with the pack or not in combat with the with Incarnation, it could be they could potentially be able to deal with it that way if it's just not in combat with them. But I hope they're not going to kill it by itself, because that feels like that would just be a pretty big time loss.
Stief Brooders now making their way to that third platform, and that third ooze getting sent into the boss there. Ooh, they have to be a little careful here. So Stief Brooders they're actually going to use Misery and Frost Nova and Ring of Peace to try and keep that slime away. That thing applies a nasty damage taken reduction to anything that gets near it. Beautiful work there, though. You can see Impy with the double Frost Nova keeping that thing managed for long enough for them to kill the boss. That was actually a really sketchy situation the Chief Brooders were almost in, but they beautifully played their way out of it and were able to kill that boss without losing basically any time to a situation that was almost very dangerous with that slime getting in there.
All right, and so now that Sniper is going to be dealt with after Dominant Venom Blade, and the Steve Brooders dealing with this slime tentacle with some of the defenders and other trash, and they are pretty far behind just in terms of relative time in the dungeon. However, Incarnation does have a lot of potential to wipe here. With that 50% heal reduction, with that Oros Cold Heart slow, with it being Quaking on Margrave Stradama, there is a lot of ways that people can get killed off rather quickly, whether it be get hit by the tentacle, or whether it be just like Quaking overlaps and stuff like that. And so now Incarnation has pulled Ichor Bileflesh with a bunch of these Devout ads, and these Devout ads notably do not bolster Ichor Bileflesh, and Ichor Bileflesh will teleport on 66 and 33% enemy forces breakpoints to the next pack, but they need to make sure that they get all of the surrounding trash killed off before they teleport it.
Yeah, these devoted ads do bolster each other, but they won't bolster Ichor Bileflesh, which means that it is safe to kind of do this pull, you know, somewhat reasonably, right? You just go from pack to pack, killing all the trash, and trying to make sure you do it somewhat evenly, but for the most part, it's not too much of a lethal thing there. The main thing that gets you in trouble is if you try and pull all 3 packs at the same time, which can be scary, can be absolutely scary. As now Incarnation will be fighting that last boss soon with those 3 tormented auras. That's what it's all going to come down for. If they can make that happen, they will win this game. But the Sheaf Brooders have been doing a phenomenal job of keeping this one extremely close. They are well within range, where if Incarnation blink here, if they have a wipe, then that will be Sheaf Brooders who instead get the opportunity for their much easier version of the last boss without that 50% healing reduction aura.
Yeah, the Steve Brooders here are doing a very dangerous pull. This double defender, double ambusher pack is really, really dangerous. Now they have a bunch of those ambusher mobs to deal with. But on the left side, Incarnation has pushed Margrave Stradama into her first phase. They do still have Bloodlust and Ashen Hollow available, so they have ample amounts of damage to be able to deal with a bunch of these phases. And if you see, look at their raid frames, you'll see that now whenever they tag this Devout ad that walked into them, now they are slowed. And they have they're affected by those affixes. But once the Devout ad dies...
Dorky!
That
He got smashed by one of the tendies, but he's fine. Yeah, he's in his meta here, and they're now going to send that Time Warp.
Did he cheat?
I don't know if he cheated. I don't think he did, but he did use his meta. I think that was just pressing meta that happened, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are 3 debuffs, but I think that the cheat is probably the highest priority. And Margrave Stradama immediately gets blasted whenever that Bloodlust has been popped by Incarnation. And here is the last dangerous part of the instance, is just this intermission. And because, look at it, everybody's so slow, Junkrat has to pop his Cloak of Shadows and even steps through those Devout ads. And it looks like everybody is slowed by the Margrave Stradama Devout mobs. And this is okay, so Incarnation is in a good spot here, and Growl even preemptively drops his Ashen Hollow to make sure that everybody's going to be able to get topped up, because they're only going to get 1 infectious rain.
Yeah, they're in great shape now. They've handled all of the hardest parts of this fight. The boss is now melting from here, and Incarnation, in dominating fashion here, are going to take game 1 against Team Sheaf Brooders, who are actually really, really doing a good job of holding this one close, as they had a very good run on their own end.